At the dawn of all remembering, before the Imperium learned to speak its own name, there was faith, not as doctrine, but as hunger. It was the quiet ache in the hearts of mortals who looked into the void and demanded that it look back. Long before banners were raised and worlds were counted, humanity believed first in survival, then in meaning, and finally in a single figure upon whom all meaning could rest. Thus, faith was not born upon the golden throne. It crawled toward across 10,000 years of fear. I have watched that crawl. I have seen faith begin as a whisper between dying soldiers and end as a scream that could drown a galaxy. The Imperium tells its children that belief was gifted to them fully formed, radiant, and eternal. This is not true. Faith was forged, hammered into shape by catastrophe, betrayal, and the slow realization that reason alone could not hold a night at bay. In the age of strife, when the warp howled unchecked and human worlds fell silent one by one, faith was fractured. Every system prayed to different gods, different sciences, different hopes. Some worshiped machines, others ancestors, others nothing at all. Humanity did not yet kneel to a throne. It knelt to necessity. But even then, the idea of salvation through unity lingered like a half-remembered dream. Then came the Emperor, not as a god, but as an answer. He spoke of truth, of reason, of a future without superstition. He promised an Imperium built not on prayer, but on knowledge. I remember the irony of it. Even then, for every word he spoke against worship, the more humanity wished to worship him. Power attracts belief as gravity attracts dust. The Emperor could not escape this law, no matter how fiercely he denied it. The Great Crusade carried that contradiction across the stars. Armies marched beneath banners of rationality, while their hearts beat with reverence. Worlds were reunited, compliance achieved, and everywhere the same pattern emerged. Humanity did not merely obey the Emperor. It trusted him, and trust, when placed beyond question, becomes faith. I observed generals who followed orders with mechanical precision, and civilians who wept upon seeing the Aquila. They did not yet call him divine, but they spoke his name as one speaks a prayer in denial. The imperial truth declared there were no gods, yet offered something far more dangerous, certainty. In a universe of demons and darkness, certainty is intoxicating. Then faith broke its chains. The Horus heresy was not only a war of brother against brother. It was a moment belief turned inward and devoured itself. When the Emperor fell silent upon the golden throne, humanity lost its anchor. The rational father became the absent god. The lie that he was only a man could not survive the scale of loss. No human could endure such sacrifice and remain merely human in the eyes of those who depended upon him. I remember terror burning. I remember the skies torn open, the palace walls shaking, and the screams echoing through stone older than empires. When the Emperor was entombed within the throne, faith surged like a wound reopened. Humanity needed him to be more than a man, because the alternative was unbearable. If he could bleed, then so could hope. Thus began the long sanctification. The ecclesiarchy would one day claim it was inevitable, divinely ordained. In truth, it was desperation given ritual. Stories were polished, doubts erased, contradictions declared heresy. The emperor became the god-emperor not through revelation, but through consensus born of fear. Billions agreed to believe, because belief was easier than grief. Cathedrals rose where laboratories once stood. Candles replaced equations. The language of progress gave way to the language of devotion. I watched scholars burn their own books, convinced they were preserving the emperor's will by destroying his words. Faith does not ask to be logical. It asks to be absolute, yet it also gave strength. That is the cruel paradox I have seen repeated across millennia. Faith shackled humanity, but it also held it together. Guardsmen charged into certain death, whispering litanies that made them fearless. Hive cities endured starvation and plague, because their people believed suffering had meaning. The Imperium learned to weaponize belief, and belief obliged. On Terra, pilgrims crawl for miles to glimpse the eternity gate, never knowing if the Emperor still sees them, still hears them, still exists as they imagine. I have seen their faces. Hope and agony are indistinguishable upon them. Faith has erased the difference. The golden throne itself became an altar. Once a device of terrible science, It is now a sacred relic fed by thousands of souls each day. The faithful call it sacrifice. I call it maintenance. Yet even I must admit that belief has transformed function into purpose. The Emperor endures, sustained not only by machinery, but by conviction. And so the Imperium preaches that faith is eternal, unchanging. But I know better. I have seen it evolve, harden, fracture, and reform. Faith is not a pillar. It is a tide, endlessly reshaping the shores of history. This is the first lesson of the Golden Throne. Before war, before memory, before destiny, there was belief. Not in gods, but in survival. Not in truth, but in hope. And when hope required a god, humanity created one and placed him upon a throne of gold, pain, and silence. The Imperium kneels still. Whether the Emperor listens is a question faith no longer dares to ask. I have stood within the grand basilicas where choirs chant in voices trained to sound like thunder restrained by stone. Every note is calculated to humble the listener, to remind them that they are small and watched. Faith hears architecture. It arches overhead, presses down upon the spine, and teaches obedience through awe. Even silence is controlled, measured, sanctified. The priests say the Emperor protects. They say his gaze is fixed upon humanity, unblinking despite his wounds. I have wondered what it would mean if that gaze were closed. Would faith collapse? Or would it grow stronger, freed from the burden of confirmation? History suggests the latter. Absence has always been more powerful than presence. Children are taught the catechisms before they learn to write. Soldiers memorize prayers alongside weapon drills. Faith is woven so deeply into imperial life that it is no longer a choice. It is the air. To question it is to suffocate. I have seen inquisitors interrogate doubt as though it were treason incarnate. For an Imperium, disbelief threatens the foundations more than any Xeno's blade. Yet faith is not uniform. On 1,000 worlds, the Emperor wears 1,000 faces. Sun God, War Father, Eternal Judge, Silent Martyr. The ecclesiarchy tolerates these variations not out of mercy, but pragmatism. What matters is not how the Emperor is imagined, but that he is. Unity of belief is less important than universality. I recall a fringe world where the faithful believed the Emperor would one day rise from the throne and walk among them once more. They prepared roads of marble for his feet, polished daily by generations who would never see him. When the Inquisition arrived, they declared this belief heretical. Hope, when too specific, becomes dangerous. Faith must be managed. It must promise everything while delivering nothing concrete. That is how it endures. And still, I cannot deny its necessity. Without faith, the Imperium would fracture overnight. Its bureaucracies are too vast, its wars too endless, its losses too constant. Only belief allows humanity to accept a future that offers no peace. Faith transforms endless war into sacred duty. The Emperor's silence is the final sermon. He speaks no words, offers no guidance, corrects no excess. In that silence, humanity hears whatever it needs to survive another day. The Golden Throne does not preach, yet its very existence commands worship more effectively than any living god ever could. I have seen empires rise on reason and fall to madness. I have seen cults form around lesser beings and burn themselves out in generations. The Imperium's faith persists because it does not promise happiness. It promises endurance. It tells humanity that suffering is not a failure, but a proof. Thus faith becomes identity. To be human in Imperium is to believe, because disbelief has no language left. The old words of rationality are relics, displayed in museums and forbidden texts. The future belongs to prayer. This is how the Imperium survives its own contradictions. It worships a man who denied godhood, sustains him through sacrifices he never asked for, and calls his devotion truth. And perhaps, in a universe as cruel as this one, truth is whatever keeps the darkness from winning. I have watched faith begin as fear and mature into dogma. I have watched it comfort the dying and condemn the living. And I know this. As long as the Golden Throne endures, faith will remain the Imperium's strongest weapon and its deepest wound. This is Chapter 1, etched not in stone, but in belief. Faith does not ask whether the Emperor lives or dies. It asks only that humanity kneel, endure, and continue. In that demand, the Imperium finds both its salvation and its curse, bound together upon the throne, inseparable, eternal, and unforgiving, carried forward by generations who will never see the beginning, only the endless continuation of belief itself. This is how faith outlives truth, memory, and even gods. In the Imperium, faith is survival made sacred, forever. War is the truest language of the Imperium, spoken more fluently than prayer and remembered longer than history. Where faith gives meaning, war gives shape. It carves borders into stars, writes law in ash, and teaches humanity what it must become to survive. I have watched the Imperium fight for 10,000 years, and in that time I have learned this truth. War is not an event, it is a condition. Before the Golden Throne became an altar, it was defended by blades and bolters slick with blood. The Imperium was born screaming, and it has never learned another way to breathe. Every world reclaimed during the Great Crusade was baptized in violence. Even when compliance came peacefully, the presence of war was always implied, waiting, patient as a loaded weapon. The Emperor understood this better than any of his sons. He spoke of unity and enlightenment, yet armed humanity to the teeth. Peace, he knew, could only exist behind an impenetrable wall of force. I remember his armies advancing like inevitability itself, legions moving with mathematical precision, their banners promising salvation or annihilation with equal sincerity. When the heresy erupted, war revealed its truest face. This was not the clean violence of conquest, but the intimate horror of betrayal. Brother killed brother beneath the same heraldry. Ideals shattered under the weight of orbital bombardment. The Imperium learned then that war does not merely destroy the enemy. It consumes the self. Terror became the altar upon which that lesson was taught. Its skies burned with ships the size of cities. Its soil drank the blood of demigods. I remember the thunder of guns echoing through continents, the way the air itself seemed to recoil from the scale of violence. War was no longer a means. It was the message. After the Emperor's interment, war did not end. It expanded. Without his guiding hand, the Imperium fractured into 1,000,000 battlefronts. Xeno's empires tested humanity's borders. Traitors returned from the warp bearing hatred sharpened by eternity. Even allies turned on one another over doctrine and territory. The Imperium responded the only way it knew how. Total war became doctrine. Every citizen a resource. Every planet a fortress or factory. Childhood ended early beneath recruitment quotas and ration lines. I have seen worlds emptied of youth to fill the ranks of distant crusades. Their parents told that sacrifice was the highest honor. War demands belief, but it feeds on bodies. The Astra Militar marches in numbers so vast that individual lives lose meaning. Soldiers become statistics. Casualties tally like expenditure. Yet I have walked among them, heard their stories whispered between artillery barges. They fight not for victory, but for the man beside them, for the prayer they mutter before charging into fire. War reduces purpose until only survival remains. The Adeptus Astartes wage war differently. To them, battle is ritual, legacy, and penance. Each engagement echoes ancient oaths sworn to a father who no longer speaks. I have seen space marines kneel in the ruins of cities they destroyed, honoring the dead even as they prepare to move on. War has hollowed them, leaving only duty behind. Technology has not softened war, it has refined it. Weapons older than memory are still used because innovation risks heresy. A lost gun is sacred not for deficiency, but for its reliability. Titans stride across battlefields like walking cathedrals, their guns roaring hymns of annihilation. War is spectacle, designed to inspire terror and devotion in equal measure. I have observed the Adeptus Mechanicus sanctify machines of slaughter, chanting Benheric prayers as they load ammunition. To them, war is communion with the machine god. Each shell fired is an offering, each malfunction a sin. In this way, war bridges faith and technology, uniting them in purpose. There is no final victory in the Imperium's wars. Every campaign won reveals two more fronts of flame. Crusades are declared not to end conflict, but to manage it, to direct the endless violence outward rather than inward. War keeps the Imperium moving. Stagnation would be death. I remember a cardinal world that celebrated its liberation with parades lasting weeks. Within a year, it was tied into starvation to support another war elsewhere. Its people accepted this without rebellion. War had taught them that survival is temporary, but service is eternal. The enemies of the Imperium are many, but war has taught humanity to fear itself most of all. Rebellion is met with extermination. Entire populations erase the serve as warnings written in planetary fire. I have seen exterminators unleashed with solemn prayers, as though genocide were a sacrament. War sanctifies the unforgivable. And yet, without war, the Imperium would collapse into its own contradictions. It is war that justifies the throne's sacrifices, the ecclesiarchy's authority, the Inquisition's terror. War gives every cruelty context. It allows humanity to tell itself that it has no choice. I have watched soldiers age decades and months, their eyes empty long before their bodies fail. I have seen commanders order charges they knew would fail, because retreat was doctrinally unacceptable. War does not reward wisdom. It rewards obedience. Across the galaxy, battlefields blur together. Names change, causes fade, but the sound remains the same. The crack of lost fire, the scream of shells, the silence afterward. War teaches Imperium to accept loss as normal, grief as routine. This is the second lesson of the Golden Throne. Faith may bind humanity, but war defines it. The Emperor sits immobile, yet his empire is always in motion, driven forward by conflict without end. The throne is sustained by sacrifice, and war ensures that sacrifice never runs dry. I have seen civilizations extinguished by humanity a century of breathing room. I have seen heroes forgotten within generations, their victories absorbed into the background noise of constant battle. War erases memory even as it creates legends. And still, the Imperia marches. It cannot stop. To stop would be to reflect, and reflection would reveal horrors too great to bear. War is distraction, purpose, and punishment all at once. The Emperor's silence watches every battlefield. His name is shouted in rage, whispered in fear, carved into blades and shells. War has turned him into a symbol sharper than any weapon. He does not command, yet billions kill in his name. I have watched war become tradition. Regiments inherit grudges older than their home worlds. Conflict are remembered not for their causes, but for their uniforms and banners. War becomes heritage, passed down like a family curse. Chapter 2 ends where the next battle begins. There is no final page, only another order, another front, another generation fed into the furnace. War does not end in the Imperium. It continues because it must. And so the galaxy burns not in sudden apocalypse, but in the slow, grinding fire of endless, sanctioned, sacred war. I have stood upon command decks where admirals stare at hololithic star maps, glowing with casualties yet to happen. They speak of projections and acceptable losses, their voices calm, reverent, as though planning a pilgrimage rather than an invasion. War has taught them to see futures measured in graves. The mathematics of annihilation is their scripture. There are moments, rare and fragile, when the guns fall silent. In those pauses, the Imperium does not celebrate. Silence is unsettling. It invites thought. Soldiers clean weapons that do not need cleaning. Priests fill the air with hymns to drown reflection. War resumes quickly, gratefully. Even victory feels indistinguishable from defeat. Cities liberated are rubble. Survivors are fewer than the dead. Flags are raised over ruins that will never truly recover. War teaches Imperium that winning means lasting slightly longer than the enemy. Nothing more. I have seen warriors who no longer remember the faces of their families, only the recoil of their rifles. I have seen children playing games that mimic executions and bombardments, because war is the only narrative they know. In this way, conflict colonizes imagination itself. The Golden Throne endures not because war protects it, but because war depends upon it. As long as the Emperor remains a reason, the violence remains justified. The cycle feeds itself, perfect and merciless, grinding on through centuries that blur into one long campaign. This is the shape of existence beneath the throne. Endless mobilization, endless sacrifice, endless war, marching forever to a horizon that recedes with every step. I have wondered whether the Emperor foresaw this future, whether he understood that war would become not merely a tool, but the Imperium's defining state of being. Perhaps he did. Perhaps this was the only way humanity could survive a universe that offers no mercy. War strips away illusion until only function remains. It leaves no room for softness, only endurance. In that sense, the Imperium has become exactly what it needs to be persist, even if persistence itself has become the greatest tragedy of all. Thus war marches on, unexamined and unquestioned, a sacred engine driving history forward. It asks nothing but obedience and gives nothing but time bought with blood. The Imperium accepts this bargain without hesitation. It has forgotten how to imagine any other future, and so it fights, because fighting is all that remains. The guns roar, the banners rise, and humanity endures, locked forever in conflict beneath the silent throne above. Memory is the quiet war the Imperium is always losing. Battles end, empires shift, stars burn out, yet memory lingers, distorted by time and necessity. I have watched the Imperium remember only what it can survive remembering. Everything else is buried beneath ritual, sealed within archives, or erased with deliberate fire. The Golden Throne endures not merely as a symbol of power, but as an anchor for remembrance, holding together a history too vast and too painful to face whole. In the earliest days, memory was fragile. During the Great Crusade, records were kept meticulously, campaigns logged, victories measured. Humanity believed it could catalog destiny. I saw remembrancers walking alongside warriors, capturing moments with words and art, convinced that truth could be preserved unchanged. They did not understand that memory bends under weight. The heresy would teach that lesson brutally. When brother turned upon brother, memory fractured alongside loyalty. Records were altered to protect morale. Names were struck from histories. Entire legions became ghosts, their deeds spoken of only in whispers or not at all. I remember the first great erasures, when truth was declared too dangerous to survive. Memory became a weapon, sharpened to cut away doubt. After terror burned and the emperor fell silent, memory hardened into dogma. The Imperium could not afford uncertainty. Events were simplified, narratives sanctified, complexity declared heresy. I watched archivists rewrite centuries in a single night, replacing nuance with reverence. The past became a shrine rather than a lesson. The Adeptus Administratum grew into a cathedral of records so vast that no single mind could comprehend it. Trillions of documents, endlessly copied, endlessly decaying. Memory became bureaucratic, preserved not through understanding, but through inertia. Entire worlds exist only as lines and ledgers. Their realities reduce to data that no one truly reads. I have wandered vaults where parchment crumbles to dust even as it is cataloged. I have seen data crypts sealed for millennia, their contents classified beyond relevance. The Imperium remembers everything and understands almost nothing. Memory here is accumulation without comprehension. The Inquisition claims guardianship over forbidden histories. They speak of protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge. Often they are correct. I have seen truths shatter worlds faster than any invasion. Yet I have also seen ignorance doom entire systems because vital lessons were buried alongside shame. Memory, when controlled, becomes tyranny. On countless shrine worlds, history is taught through stained glass in him. Events are frozen into iconography, stripped of ambiguity. Heroes are flawless, villains absolute. There is comfort in this simplicity. Faith feeds upon it. Memory becomes devotion rather than inquiry. The Astartes remember differently. Their memories are gene-bound, ritualized, etched into flesh and oath. Each chapter carries fragments of ancient truth, distorted by tradition and trauma. I have heard veterans speak of battles that occurred before their founding, memories inherited rather than lived. For them, the past is not gone. It marches beside them. Among the common citizenry, memory is local and fleeting. Few remember beyond their grandparents' lives. The Imperium scale renders individual history insignificant. I have seen family forget their own origins within generations, replaced by loyalty to regiment, hive, or creed. Memory shrinks until survival alone remains. Technology was meant to preserve memory eternally. Instead, It decays like everything else. STC fragments are treated as holy scripture, their origin forgotten. Machines remember functions, but not purpose. The Imperium maintains devices older than its understanding, performing rituals to coax remembrance from circuits that no longer know why they exist. I recall a forged world that lost the meaning of a crucial rite. They continue performing it for centuries, unaware it was once an emergency shutdown protocol. When disaster came, memory failed them and the planet burned. Tradition without understanding is memory hollowed out. The Golden Throne itself is the greatest repository of unspoken memory. It remembers the Emperor's intent more faithfully than any archive, yet it cannot speak. Humanity projects meaning onto its silence, filling the gaps with doctrine. The throne remembers truth. The Imperium remembers what it needs. I have watched monuments rise to commemorate wars whose causes are no longer known. Dates are sacred, reasons forgotten. Memory becomes ritualized grief without context. It binds society together, but also traps it in cycles it cannot recognize. Occasionally, memory resurfaces unexpectedly. A rediscovered log, a recovered relic, a survivor's testimony. These moments are dangerous. They challenge the accepted narrative. I have seen such revelations spark reform and rebellion alike. Memory is volatile when freed from control. This is the third lesson of the Golden Throne. Memory is not preservation. It is selection. The Imperium survives by choosing which truths endure and which are sacrificed. Forgetting is as vital as remembering. I have lived long enough to see history repeat itself precisely because it was forgotten imperfectly. The Imperium does not learn. It recalls. And recall is passive, reverent, unquestioning. As centuries grind on, memory grows heavier. The past presses down upon the present like sediment, burying innovation beneath tradition. New ideas are weighed against ancient precedent and found wanting. Memory becomes resistance to change. Yet without memory, the Imperium would dissolve. Identity requires continuity. The Emperor's name links 10,000 years of humanity into a single, trembling narrative. Memory tells the Imperium who it is, even if that story is incomplete. I have seen worlds liberated whose people could not remember why they had rebelled. Punishment followed regardless. Memory had been erased, but consequence remained. Forgetting does not absolve. In the end, memory is Imperium's compromise with eternity. It cannot truly last forever, but it pretends, preserving fragments like relics. Each generation adds its layer, obscuring what came before. The Golden Throne remembers a future that never came to pass. The Imperium remembers a past that never truly existed. Between them, humanity persists, guided by half-truths and sanctified omissions. Chapter 3 closes not with revelation, but with acceptance. Memory will never be whole again. It will remain fractured, curated, weaponized. And still it will endure, because even broken remembrance is better than the void of forgetting. There are those rare individuals who remember too much, scholars whose minds hold contradictory histories, inquisitors who have read sealed archives, astropaths who glimpse echoes of the past through the warp. The Imperium fears them quietly. Excessive memory is a liability. To remember clearly is to question inevitability. Many such minds vanish, reassigned, silenced, or sanctified through martyrdom. Memory is safest when dispersed thinly across billions. I have seen entire cultures deliberately reshape their own past to survive conquest. Defeated peoples adopt imperial myths, rewriting ancestral stories so they align with sanctioned history. In doing so, they live on at the cost of truth. Memory becomes negotiation rather than record. Even language erodes remembrance. High Gothic preserves ancient cadence, but its meanings drift. Words remain while understanding shifts beneath them. A phrase once describing hope becomes a term of obedience. Memory embedded in speech decays unnoticed. The warp itself remembers differently. It reflects emotion rather than fact, echoing humanity's strongest beliefs back at it. Legends become entities. Myths gain form. In this way, corrupted memory takes on substance, haunting reality. The Imperium battles demons born not only of sin, but of misremembered truth. I have wondered if the Emperor remembers. Entombed, sustained, silent. Does his mind drift through recollection or remain fixed on a single moment of sacrifice? If he remembers everything, then his burden is unimaginable. If he remembers nothing, then faith has truly replaced him. Across millennia, memory becomes sedimentary. Layers of interpretation bury origin. Few care what truly happened, only what is said to have happened. This is how memory becomes destiny, shaping choices long after cause is lost. Thus the Imperium marches forward, guided by a past it cannot fully see. Memory lights the path just enough to prevent collapse, never enough to allow escape. It is both torch and chain. So I continue to observe, a witness to remembrance and erasure alike. I know that history here is not written to be understood, but to be endured. Memory does not seek accuracy. It seeks survival. And in surviving, it changes everything. One day, perhaps, the Imperium will face a memory it cannot reshape. A truth too vast to sanctify, too clear to erase. On that day, remembrance may become reckoning. Until then, memory remains controlled decay, carefully managed, endlessly recycled. I have seen enough to know that forgetting is not failure here. It is design. The Imperium forgets so it may continue, unburdened by the weight of what it has done. Memory persists not as truth, but as function, and that is enough. So the archives grow, the hymns repeat, and the past becomes ritual rather than record. Humanity moves forward facing backward, guided by echoes instead of understanding. Memory is no longer a mirror, but a wall upon which shadows are projected. I have seen this before in empires long dust. It always ends the same. Yet still they endure, because endurance is all that memory now demands. Nothing more, nothing less. The throne watches. Memory trembles. History breathes on. And I remain, counting centuries, knowing remembrance will fail last of all, until even that final memory fades into sanctioned silence. Such is the fate of empires. Remembered, forgotten, enduring, alone, always. Technology is the Imperium's most misunderstood relic. It is worshipped as miracle, feared as heresy, and used without comprehension. I have watched humanity forget how to build the future while desperately maintaining the past. Beneath the golden throne, technology is no longer a tool. It is a memory pretending to be a machine. In the distant ages before the Imperium, technology was ambition made tangible. Humanity shaped stars, bent matter, and trusted knowledge over ritual. Machines were servants, extensions of curiosity. I remember a time when progress was not a sin, when innovation was celebrated rather than feared. That age died quietly, strangled by its own creations and the horrors they unleashed. The age of strife taught humanity that knowledge without restraint invites annihilation. Abominable intelligences turned logic into slaughter. Warp storms punished arrogance. When the Imperium rose from that ruin, it carried trauma deep within its foundations. Technology would survive, but curiosity would not. Understanding became optional. Obedience became essential. Thus the cult Mechanicus emerged, not as engineers, but as priests. On Mars and 1,000 forge worlds, technology was reborn as religion. Circuits became scripture. Maintenance became liturgy. I have stood within forge temples where engines are anointed with oils older than empires, their operators chanting prayers instead of diagnostics. The machine does not need belief to function, yet belief has become inseparable from function. The Omnicia was named, a divine abstraction to justify obedience to ancient designs. In truth, it was fear given form. Fear that deviation would invite disaster. Fear that humanity could not be trusted with its own genius. Technology was frozen in time, preserved like an insect in amber. I have watched tech priests refuse to innovate even as systems fail catastrophically. To alter a design is to challenge the wisdom of the ancients. Better to repeat a sacred error than commit an unsanctioned improvement. In this way, technology becomes conservative, not in ideology, but in structure. Change is heresy. Stability is salvation. The golden throne itself is the ultimate contradiction, a device of impossible complexity, built from sciences long lost, sustained through rituals barely understood. Thousands labored daily to keep it functioning, none able to replicate it, few able to comprehend it. Humanity survives because of a machine it cannot repair, only appease. I have watched technicians die maintaining systems they do not understand. Their sacrifice is celebrated as holy. The Imperium tells itself this is devotion. I know it is dependence. Technology has outgrown humanity's comprehension, and so humanity has redefined ignorance as faith. Weapons follow the same pattern. The lost gun endures because it is simple, reliable, and understood through rote. Plasma weapons are feared because their secrets are half forgotten. Titans stride across worlds powered by reactors no living mind could design from scratch. Their machine spirits are appeased with song and incense, as though they were temperamental gods rather than complex systems. The Imperium claims technology serves mankind. In practice, mankind serves technology's preservation. Entire worlds exist solely to produce parts for machines whose purpose they barely grasp. Innovation would require understanding, and understanding risks memory. Memory risks truth. Truth risks collapse. I have seen forge worlds where children are augmented before they learn to speak, their flesh reshaped to serve machines. To them, technology is not progress. It is identity. The line between human and mechanism blurs not through advancement, but through surrender. And yet, technology endures where flesh fails. Void ships older than nations still cross the stars. Life support systems sustain populations that would otherwise perish instantly. Without ancient machines, the Imperium would die within generations. Technology is both crutch and spine. I remember a Muggos who attempted true innovation. He believed the Omniscia desired understanding, not stagnation. His work could have saved millions. He was executed for tech heresy, his findings sealed, his forge purged. The Imperium chose ritual over salvation. It always does. This is the fourth lesson of the Golden Throne. Technology does not advance here. It persists. It survives not through mastery, but through repetition. The Imperium has mistaken continuity for progress. Even communication is haunted by decay. Astropaths scream messages through the warp, their minds scarred with every transmission. Data is corrupted, delayed, misinterpreted. Technology struggles against the very reality it operates within. The galaxy resists clarity. I have observed that the Imperium fears nothing more than understanding how much it has lost. To truly comprehend its machines would be to confront the decline. Better to believe the ancients were wiser. Better to believe perfection lies behind, not ahead. The Adeptus Mechanicus speaks of rediscovery, not invention. Every breakthrough is framed as recovery of lost knowledge. This preserves the illusion that humanity is not regressing, merely circling toward remembered glory. In truth, the circle tightens, growing smaller with each century. The Golden Throne hums constantly, its mechanisms grinding against entropy. Each day it functions is a victory over time. Each day it brings humanity closer to the moment when ritual will fail and no knowledge remains to replace it. Technology here is a race against forgetting. I have seen systems fail catastrophically because no one dared question ancient schematics. I have seen miracles performed by machines whose creators died 10,000 years ago. Technology is legacy without inheritance. And still, the Imperium venerates it, not because it understands it, but because it cannot live without it. Faith and technology intertwine, each compensating for the other's absence. Where knowledge ends, belief begins. Some whisper that innovation still exists, hidden within sealed vaults, guarded by radical sections. Perhaps. I have seen hints, fragments, anomalies that suggest humanity has not entirely surrendered its curiosity. But such sparks are fragile. The Imperium extinguishes them quickly, fearing fire more than cold. The throne watches all this in silence. A machine sustaining a god, sustaining an empire sustained by machines. The recursion is perfect. Technology here no longer serves purpose. It sustains structure. One day, the machines will fail. Not all at once, but piece by piece, ritual by ritual. When that day comes, humanity will pray louder, not learn faster. And that will seal its fate. Until then, the Imperium endures on borrowed understanding, worshiping devices it cannot rebuild, trusting that yesterday's genius will outlast tomorrow's decay. Technology has become sacred precisely because it is irreplaceable. I have witnessed civilizations that advanced too far and destroyed themselves. I have witnessed others that refused to advance and slowly suffocated. The Imperium has chosen the latter path. It trades potential for permanence, future for survival. Thus technology stands beneath the golden throne, not as triumph, but as relic, a monument to what humanity once was, and a warning of what it no longer dares to become. The machines hum, the prayers continue, the knowledge fades, and still the Imperium lives. For now. Destiny is the lie the Imperium tells itself to endure the truth. It is the promise that suffering is direction, that blood spilled today serves a purpose tomorrow, that the endless grind of history is moving towards something other than exhaustion. I have watched destiny invoked whenever reason fails, whenever loss becomes too great to justify. It is the final refuge of an empire that cannot stop. In the beginning, destiny was ambition. During the Great Crusade, humanity believed its fate was manifest, written in the stars waiting to be claimed. The emperor spoke of unity as inevitability, of a future where mankind would stand unchallenged. I remember that confidence, sharp and radiant. Destiny then was something to be seized, not endured. The heresy shattered that vision. Destiny became retroactive, rewritten to explain catastrophe. What had been ambition transformed into prophecy. Defeat was reinterpreted as sacrifice. Failure became necessary. The Imperium learned to look backward for meaning instead of forward for hope. Now, destiny is doctrine. The ecclesiarchy preaches that humanity's fate is bound eternally to the golden throne. The emperor must suffer so mankind may live. The Imperium must endure, so the galaxy does not fall to darkness. Destiny absolves all cruelty. If the end is ordained, then the means require no forgiveness. I have seen entire populations march into death with the assurance that their lives fulfilled a greater plan. Destiny is efficient that way. It silences resistance by framing obedience as cosmic alignment. To resist is not merely rebellion. It is blasphemy against fate itself. The Inquisition understands destiny as threat management. Futures are weighed, probabilities interrogated, entire worlds condemned to prevent outcomes deemed worse. I have observed Inquisitors speak of tomorrow as though it were clay to be shaped by extermination. Destiny, to them, is not hope, it is containment. The Adeptus Astartes' live destiny is burden. Each chapter believes its role is preordained, its purpose fixed by gene seed and oath. They do not ask whether their wars matter. They ask only whether they fight correctly. Destiny removes doubt, but it also removes choice. I have seen Space Marines die without regret, not because they desired death, but because destiny demanded it. Among the common citizenry, destiny is quieter. It is the acceptance that one will never leave their hive, never rise beyond their caste, never see the stars they labor to support. Destiny becomes resignation sanctified. Hope narrows until it fits inside survival. Astropaths and psychers glimpse destiny differently. Through the warp, time fractures. Futures bleed into one another. I have heard them speak of branching possibilities, of endings that contradict each other. The Imperium fears such knowledge. A destiny with alternatives is destabilizing. So these visions are classified, filtered, or ignored. The Emperor himself was once said to see the future. If true, then destiny is his greatest failure, or his greatest compromise. Perhaps he saw that humanity could survive only by believing its suffering was inevitable. Perhaps destiny was never meant to be escape, only endurance. I have watched crusades launched in the name of destiny, their goals vague, their timelines infinite. Victory is declared even when nothing changes. Destiny does not require success. It requires continuation. As long as the Imperium moves, it believes it is fulfilling its role. The warp mocks destiny relentlessly. It twists intention, amplifies desire, and births horrors from belief itself. Demons claim destiny as readily as saints. I have seen cultists convinced their damnation was foretold, embracing it with religious fervor. Destiny is neutral. It serves any narrative that demands obedience. This is the fifth lesson of the Golden Throne. Destiny is not a path. It is a justification. It explains why the Imperium cannot stop, cannot change, cannot forgive itself. To abandon destiny would be to admit that suffering might be meaningless. I have known civilizations that rejected destiny and collapsed under the weight of uncertainty. I have known others that clung to prophecy until it strangled them. The Imperium has chosen the latter. It prefers a terrible certainty to fragile freedom. There are whispers, always, of alternative destinies, of reform, of awakening, of an emperor who will rise, speak, and lead humanity into renewal. These stories persist because destiny requires hope, however distant. I have seen such hopes weaponized, crushed, or redirected into acceptable forms. Destiny must never arrive. Arrival would end obedience. The golden throne embodies suspended destiny. It promises resolution without delivering it. The emperor is neither dead nor alive. The future is neither saved nor lost. Humanity exists in perpetual anticipation. Destiny is always tomorrow. I have observed that destiny becomes most powerful when it is undefined. Specific futures can be disproven. Vague inevitability cannot. The Imperium speaks of survival, dominance, order, never peace. Peace would imply an end state. Destiny here is endless motion. Even rebellion claims destiny. Traitors speak of overthrow as fate fulfilled. Zeno's prophets declare humanity's extinction inevitable. Destiny is contested, weaponized, mirrored across every ideology. The galaxy is crowded with certainties. What separates the Imperium is scale. Its destiny is not personal, not planetary, but species-wide. Individual lives are irrelevant against such magnitude. Destiny flattens humanity into resource. I have watched children branded with futures they did not choose. Soldiers told the moment of their death was already written. Workers assured their suffering fed a cosmic plan. Destiny strips agency while pretending to grant meaning. And yet, without destiny, the Imperia would fracture instantly. 10,000 years of atrocity require justification. Destiny provides it retroactively, endlessly recontextualizing horror as necessity. I have stood before the golden throne and felt the weight of futures imagined and abandoned. The machine hums not with certainty, but with delay. Destiny is postponed, stretched thin across millennia. Perhaps this is the Emperor's final mercy. By never fulfilling destiny, he spares humanity the revelation that there is nothing waiting at the end. No ascension, no resolution, only continuation. The Imperium marches because destiny says it must. It sacrifices because destiny demands it. It endures because destiny forbids collapse. Destiny is a chain that binds history into a single, grinding direction. I have seen enough to know this. Destiny is strongest where choice has been removed. The Imperium has mastered that removal. Thus humanity advances blindly, convinced the path is preordained, even as the ground crumbles beneath its feet. Destiny does not guide, it excuses. One day, the Imperium will reach a moment where destiny offers no explanation, where suffering outweighs belief. When that day comes, destiny will either transform or shatter. Until then, it remains the Empire's most sacred fiction. The throne waits, the future recedes, destiny endures. And so humanity continues, not because it knows where it is going, but because destiny insists that stopping is not permitted, that its fate beneath the golden throne, motion without arrival, purpose without end, survival elevated to cosmic mandate. I have watched destinies die screaming and others fade unnoticed. At the heart of the Imperium sits the greatest silence ever constructed. The golden throne does not speak. It does not command. It does not correct. It endures. Once, a voice guided humanity with certainty and intent. Now there is only stillness, wrapped in machinery and prayer. The Emperor's silence is not emptiness. It is weight. In the earliest years after his interment, humanity listened desperately. Every fluctuation in the throne systems was interpreted as meaning. Every dream, every psychic echo, every coincidental victory was proclaimed revelation. The Imperium strained to hear a voice that no longer answered. Silence became a canvas upon which belief painted whatever it required. As centuries passed, the listening changed. Silence was no longer questioned. It was normalized, ritualized, sanctified. The emperor's inability to speak was reframed as infinite wisdom. His stillness became proof of transcendence. Silence, once terrifying, became comforting. It asked nothing. It demanded nothing. It allowed humanity to continue without challenge. I have stood within the sanctum imperialis, where sound itself seems afraid to exist. There, even breathing feels intrusive. Thousands of lives are consumed daily to sustain the throne, yet the chamber remains profoundly quiet. No cry escapes the machinery. No voice acknowledges the sacrifice. Silence accepts all offerings equally. This is the final transformation of power. When authority no longer needs to speak, it becomes absolute. The emperor does not issue decrees, yet his name governs every decision. Silence cannot contradict. Silence cannot be wrong. It allows others to speak in its place, unchecked. The ecclesiarchy speaks for the silent God. The high lords speak for the silent throne. Generals, inquisitors, priests, and prophets all claim to interpret what silence means. And silence, being empty of resistance, allows them all. In this way, the Imperium becomes a chorus shouting into a void that never replies. I have observed that silence is the Imperium's most effective stabilizer. Words provoke debate. Commands invite failure. Silence invites obedience. It suggests inevitability. If the Emperor does not intervene, then whatever occurs must be acceptable. Silence absolves responsibility. On distant battlefields, soldiers pray before combat and receive no answer. They march anyway. Silence does not discourage them. It confirms what they already believe, that survival depends not on guidance, but on endurance. The absence of response becomes permission to act without doubt. Silence follows extermination closely. After a world burns, there is no explanation, no apology, no reflection. The void left behind is literal and symbolic. Silence consumes the dead faster than memory ever could. The Imperium moves on, unburdened by unanswered questions. I have listened to the silence of archives sealed forever, of truths locked away because no one remains who can safely hear them. Knowledge ends not with refutation, but with quiet removal. Silence is censorship perfected. The warp itself is never silent. Yet even there, the Emperor's presence manifests as stillness, a pressure, a void within the storm. Psychers speak of it with fear and reverence. Silence there is not peace. It is dominance. It pushes back the screaming madness just enough for reality to persist. Perhaps this is the Emperor's final gift. Not salvation, not victory, but containment. A silence vast enough to hold the galaxy together by denying it resolution. As long as nothing ends, nothing is concluded. I have watched civilizations collapse loudly, their final moments filled with declarations and denial. The Imperium will not end that way. It is learning to die quietly, stretching its final breath across millennia. Silence is how it survives its own decay. The people of the Imperium rarely notice the silence anymore. It surrounds them from birth. Hive cities roar constantly, yet beneath the noise lies an absence of true dialogue. No one speaks of alternatives. No one asks what comes after. Silence has colonized thought itself. This is the sixth lesson of the Golden Throne. Silence is not weakness. It is control refined to perfection. It allows suffering without explanation, authority without accountability, endurance without hope. Silence is the final architecture of the Imperium. I have seen rebels who screamed their defiance before dying. Their words echoed briefly, then vanished. Silence absorbed them. I have seen reformers silenced not by execution, but by irrelevance, their ideas left unanswered until they faded. Silence is more patient than violence. Even prayer has become one-sided. Humanity speaks endlessly to a God who does not reply. The act itself matters more than response. Silence transforms prayer into habit, and habit into identity. The Golden Throne does not promise eternity. It enforces delay. Each moment it functions is another moment without conclusion. Humanity lives suspended between catastrophe and resolution, trapped in the present tense of survival. I have wondered what would happen if the throne were to fail completely. Not explode, not collapse. Simply stop. No sound, no light, perfect stillness. Would humanity finally hear the truth hidden beneath 10,000 years of noise? Or would it scream until the silence was filled again with lies? Perhaps the emperor chose silence deliberately. Words can be misunderstood. Silence cannot be disproven. It allows humanity to project meaning endlessly, sustaining itself on interpretation rather than instruction. In that way, the Imperium no longer needs its god to speak. It has learned to speak for him. Across the galaxy, stars die quietly, their light fading long after their extinction. The Imperium is much the same. Its brilliance persists long after its vitality is gone. Silence marks that transition. It is a sound of something continuing beyond its natural end. I remain a witness, listening where others do not. I hear the silence beneath the hymns, beneath the engines, beneath the screams. It is growing, slowly, inevitably. One day, it will no longer be contained within the throne. It will spread, unanswered and unopposed. When that day comes, there will be no final proclamation, no last sermon, no divine revelation, only the quiet realization that nothing was listening anymore, or perhaps that something always was, and simply chose never to answer. The Imperium fears that question more than any enemy. So it kneels, it marches, it prays, it sacrifices, and the golden throne remains silent. That silence is the Emperor's final sermon. It says, endure without understanding, continue without assurance, believe without response, and humanity obeys. The galaxy listens. Nothing answers. Silence endures, long after word have failed, long after faith has hardened, long after war has blurred into habit. When all else fades, silence remains, vast and unbroken, holding the memory of everything that was said and everything that never needed to be. Thus ends a chronicle of the Golden Throne, not with revelation, but with stillness, not with hope, but with persistence, not with salvation, but with silence. And in that silence, an empire waits, eternal, alone, and listening to God who has already said everything he ever will. I prefer this response.